Warning: this show is intended for mature audiences only. Viewers' discretion is advised. This show may contain strong language and sensitive or controversial topics. We are not attorneys and are not providing legal advice. The views and conversations are our own thoughts and feelings, and therefore, purely speculation.
The entertainment world and beyond.
Skywalker air miles, feeding on a surface, gliding on water, constricted and conflicted.
Welcome to Purely Speculation, a show that exposes the harmful effects of the criminal legal system. I'm your host, Heather Lewis, the Executive Director of the Reuniting Family Bail Fund and practitioner of participatory defense. On this show, you'll learn about the unspoken horrors of the criminal justice system and meet fierce allies and advocates. We will make the best of our traumatic experiences. We will get angry. We may even cry. We most certainly going to laugh, but one thing's for sure, we're going to keep it real. Welcome to Purely Speculation.
When they free my sins and let them loose, they was killing me, I got a scar to prove, got me paralyzed, I could even barely move. Out the way I took the pain again.
Good evening, folks. Welcome to the third edition of Purely Speculations Court Watch edition. We have Taria, who is our Court Watch coordinator, and Sally, who is a new inductee into the court watching world and the world of the criminal justice system here in Montgomery County. Before we get into our show tonight, we want to take a moment of silence to recognize and stand in solidarity with our AAPI family in California. When I was preparing for tonight's show and recognizing that there was a mass shooting, there were actually two mass shootings in California. One in Monterey Park, where 11 people were gunned down, and that was the one at the dance studio. And there was another one in San Mateo County, and that's San Jose, California, where our people are. Our debug family is based in San Jose, California. In Half Moon Bay, 7 people were gunned down in a mass shooting. And so we just want to take a moment of silence to recognize those lives lost and stand in solidarity with our AAPI community. Thank you all. And stay tuned, because we do have members of the AAPI community that we are going to bring on the show and have some very well overdue conversations with our Asian brothers and sisters, and debunk some of the myths and disperse with some of the stereotypes and things like that about that community, and really understand who they are and how this incident and other incidents like this have impacted their community. So stay tuned for that, because we are definitely going to get into that at a later date. But without further ado, we have Sally and Taria. So we're here this is Court Watch 101. And so Taria is our seasoned Court Watch coordinator, and Sally is new to the experience. She had her first court watching experience, I think, a week or so ago. And so Sally, explain to me kind of what got you interested before you even stepped foot in the courtroom, or if you've ever even been in a courtroom and had to go through a criminal proceedings. What about this process and this movement got you wanted to be interested in doing this?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've always been interested in justice and peace and freedom, and did a lot of marching and protesting, and wanted to see what could I do locally. And I was glad a friend of mine told me about what you were doing, and I thought, that sounds like something I can do. I'm available now in my life stage during daytime hours, so I could come, to the court times. And my experience is I don't have much experience in county court. I've never actually made it for jury duty even. I've been called many times, but never actually got to serve. Disappointed about that, but hopefully someday. So I guess I've been in district court, local courts, but not at the courthouse for the county. So what interested me was I thought it's something I can do. And you had talked about court watching. We had a meeting and discussed it in general terms. And I did go one time, and I ended up wanting to stay longer. I was planning on just being there for a half a day, but it sounded like some more interesting cases were coming up. So
before you go into some of the cases that you've seen, you were in Judge Rogers' courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
Judge Rogers does miscellaneous court. So in that courtroom, they're hearing all types of cases. You were hearing DUIs and some theft things and some stuff that was old, and they were kind of coming back. Taria, can you just give us a little insight into like miscellaneous court and what some of the other courts are doing? Because when I as we're learning this with Sally, I was like, you know what, miscellaneous court was really a good training ground. And so you get to hear a lot of cases relatively quickly versus a trial, which is over a series of days. So you want to give us a little kind of insight as to like the different types of courts and different where the judges are and things like that, because there's more than miscellaneous and trials. There's all types of courts. You want to talk a little bit about the different courts?
Yes. Miscellaneous court is basically what Sally was basically referring to is all different kind of hearings. So that can go from as low as a summary offense to as high as a felony. And usually with miscellaneous court, it's basically a worked out agreement probably between prosecution and the defense, and they come to an agreement, or if they don't come to agreement, they do a small little hearing on the situation, and it usually gets resolved right there. Then you have criminal court, where miscellaneous also can be, like I said, as small as a summary offense, as my example is like a traffic ticket. So someone could be going there for miscellaneous court for a speeding ticket, and they'll come out with either no points, and the judge will award them no points and like a $35 fine, reduce the fine, and then that's how it gets resolved. Criminal court is all the brackets that don't fall under civil. So criminal court is usually heard in Judge Rothstein's courtroom, Court A, Judge Furman, Court F, Judge Del Rich, Court D, Judge Branca, Judge B, Courtroom B, and Judge Carpenter, Courtroom C. And then you go down the lower level and you have Judge O'Neill, Judge Rogers downstairs on the lower level. That's H and G. Mm-hmm. O'Neill is also the drug court judge, so he also does that. And then you have Judge Eisenberg. It might be a different judge, but you have Opium court, and that's behavior health, and also Opium court. Now they have different from the drug court that Judge O'Neill runs. And then you got on the 5th floor, you got different courts that's up there also, that is usually criminal proceedings. And then you have one up there that's also family court. And then across the street on the 9th floor, you have civil court, and that's usually the PFA hearings and also the custody battles.
And then all the way down the road, Port Indian Road is where we have the juvenile
courts. Yes.
Right. And so, Sally, let's go back to the cases that you found interesting, because when you gave such a detailed report, and you just reminded me of myself, I'm like, she is so good. Like she saw so much and picked up on a lot. And that's what really makes a good court watcher, being observant, kind of hearing things, and you tuned into something that said, "Ooh, that piqued your interest," and said, let me stick around for this and see what happens. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the one that really interested me was a defendant who had been sent. He had been sentenced and was um, imprisoned, and he was appealing his sentence, and he had asked for his court records, and he was having problems getting all his boxes. He had 5 boxes that were sent to him, and he had only been able to look at 2. So,
And this gentleman is incarcerated, so we just want to say that. So they're not sending him to his house; they're sending him to his
his
MCCF.
facility. Yeah, yeah. So it just was very interesting to frustrating to hear how slow the process was. I think it was something, like he had already served like 7 years, something like that, and I don't know when he did decide to appeal, but still, it had been months and months trying to get more of his boxes.
Right. And the facility, didn't necessarily have a good explanation as to why he hadn't gotten all of his boxes. He only had 2 out of the 5.
Well, yeah, he was only allowed to have 2 at a time because more than that was considered a fire hazard. Right. So, I don't know.
And what was the judge's response to that?
Well, they decided that they just, cleared all the details up, exactly what it was that he needed, what he wanted, and they were going to contact the facility where he was, serving his time directly.
Mm-hmm. And make sure that he has access to the other 3 boxes, whether he's in the social worker's room or he swaps one out or whatever. They're going to make an effort. But also, too, I think you mentioned that the judge kind of threw his hands up and said, I really don't have any control over the facility and them ensuring that he gets his documents.
Right. Yeah.
And so I can definitely feel your frustration on that. And that's our frustration. And we're not the one on the inside fighting for our freedom, right? So here we have, someone on the inside fighting for his freedom, trying to get the documents. I mean, and we hear stories like this all the time. This you heard in the courtroom. We hear some of the stories where the folks on the inside aren't getting their discovery in a timely fashion. They're not having access to their attorney. They can't make phone calls. And, so all of these things that kind of impede and impact people being able to fight their case on the inside. That's why we find it so important and critical that people are able to fight their cases from the outside,
right?
Because you have access to the law library. When you're on the inside, whatever happens, it could be a lockdown, it could be 23 and 1, and you don't get access to the law library and things like that. So there's many cases like that where folks on the inside just don't have access to the documents and the resources that they need to be able to fight their case. So
yeah, I have a lot to learn about this, but they had tried to do an electronic hearing, and the electronics just weren't cooperating. So that's why he was actually brought physically to the courthouse so they could get it done. And he was something I noticed is he was representing himself as well.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
They don't always let you do that, but in appeal, we've seen stranger things. And so what you're doing is court watching. And we have a methodology or a practice called participatory defense. And so that is an organizing model, community organizing model, where we empower families who are fighting a criminal case. Here are some facts about participatory defense. It's a system that's intended to give your loved one time saved versus time served, which the system wants to give you. Our goal is to get you time saved. People think, oh, you're trying to get, people off and this and that. No, we recognize that there are inconsistencies, there are bias, there's judgments, there's, punitive reasons why, folks are given, stacked charges and, high bail and all these things. So we are there to be the eyes essentially, or to hold these system actors accountable. And so that's one of the reasons why we do court watching, right? So we want to make sure that we're in that space. We hear what's going on. It's not that, it's hearsay or somebody else told us or somebody's telling us a story or we're just emotional about it, that, this whole system is corrupt and let's just do away with it, tear it down and start afresh. We're actually there witnessing what the judges are doing, what the defense attorneys are doing, what the prosecutors are doing, just how they handle maybe a crisis in the building, so when we're present, and that's what we're wanting to be, or we're working hard, very hard to be, is that trusted resource of the eyes and ears that are inside the courtrooms, for the other folks that just don't believe this system is working the way it's working, or the DA that believes, Kevin Steele doesn't believe that his DAs behave inappropriately. He believes that the oath that they took is exactly how they're going to behave in the courtroom. And we're there to tell him, no, that's not what they do. We have many cases that there's very little evidence and they're prosecuting the cases because, like you said, you've never been called to serve on a jury. They must have figured that you were a pretty sound-minded individual. Had a little bit of an intelligence and that you could probably follow the case and you probably would ask some questions and probably impede the rapid nature in which the system comes to guilty verdicts. And so they don't want anybody on a jury that is going to ask questions or, slow up their process. So I'm not surprised that you haven't been called. I've been called, I've never been served. And that jury thing is a whole nother conversation. But my experience, so with participatory defense, we do both things. We do court watching because we're looking for accountability for those system actors, but we also do court support. And while you were doing court watching with Judge Rogers, I was providing court support in the juvenile system down on Port Indian Road with Judge Garrett Page. And I had gotten a call from a family. We were working together for a couple of weeks because I wasn't quite sure where the case was. They kept sending me their information. I just assumed that person was incarcerated and they needed bail. And I'm looking, I couldn't find them. So I'm reaching out and they're like, oh, well, this is his date of birth. And I'm still looking, can't find him. Juveniles cases are not public record. They are sealed because they're juveniles. So that's not something that we have access to. So I couldn't find him, not knowing that this was a juvenile. So she finally sent me the paperwork and I saw, oh, this is a juvenile case. And so, I call and I say, hey, what's going on? The case was the next day. And I said, what are you planning to do? The public defender, said, oh, you should take a plea deal. He had felony theft charges or something. I said, well, did he see his discovery? And she said, well, what's that? So now you know what you don't know what you don't know. She didn't know what a discovery was. She didn't really realize that this was a juvenile case to alert me that this was a juvenile case. Her nephew, juvenile, had only talked to his public defender via phone for 15 minutes. And I'm like, well, that's not a secure line. How were they able to really talk about the details of this case and, whatever discovery? And she's like, yeah, they literally had a conversation for 15 minutes and now they're moving for him to accept a guilty plea. And she's like, he's going to have a felony. I said, yeah, we don't want that. And so I told her a couple of things. I said, first of all, you don't want to make your accept a plea deal without seeing what the evidence is that the DA has against you. So that's what the discovery will show. Any video, any documents, any evidence, eyewitnesses or witness statements or counts or whatever, that will be in your discovery. He had none of that. And they were asking him to accept a guilty plea. And I said, and this was the other thing, depending on how the public defender or a private attorney was responding to the family. So some defense attorneys with juveniles will adamantly say, the juvenile is my client. I don't want to talk to you. And which is insane to me because juveniles what do they know? And they don't know what questions to ask. And so trying to get the best outcome for a juvenile is challenging. But also, the discussion about the discovery, the plea deal, what the discovery looked like. I said, and if they're responsive to you, then this is what you say. If they're not responsive to you and only want to talk to your nephew, this is what you need to empower your nephew to say. Tell him he wants to see his discovery. He needs to see this before he can make an informed decision about whether or not to take a guilty plea. And let me tell you, when the next day we sat in the courtroom waiting for Judge Page to take the bench longer than it did for them to decide that we're going to take this to trial, simply because they asked for the discovery. And then the public defender said, yeah, the video doesn't show them in the car or doing this or that. So something as simple as asking a question of your defense attorney got this kid a whole different outcome. We're not at, trial yet, but the fact that he was within 24 hours of accepting a guilty plea that would leave him with a felony, he now has an opportunity to fight his case with the evidence that they have against him so that he can get the best outcome for his case. And it's like defense attorneys, they seem to just give you the bare minimum or give you what they think you need versus giving you it all. And so if they gave it to you all, then it'd be a longer process, right? So this is such a fast track. And you got to see that in miscellaneous court. They heard how many cases? 30, 40 cases in miscellaneous court versus a trial where it's one case and they're going through all these things. So when things are going quick, people don't think, they just want to get out of there. They want to get out of jail. They want to go home. They want to get back to their life. And, it's really challenging to really, and that's our job and our goal for, educating ourselves and educating the community is so that they can slow this process down from, incarceration. Taria, you mentioned some of the other courts, diversion courts. Can you talk a little bit about the diversion courts and what they're designed to do? Because you talked about, I guess, the opioid. So that's a separate court now, in addition to the drug court that they're now, because of the opioid crisis.
Yes. And I forgot that they do have a veterans court also.
Right.
So I forgot to add that in. But yes, the difference with the diversion courts is that they're programs that you have to be accepted in. So pretty much a defense attorney has to put in a application for their client. And then from there, they get evaluated. And then I guess it's by the discrepancy of the DA that runs them different courts if they want to take or accept that person into that program. They're not that easy to get into. It's a lot of criteria. It's a lot of legwork. It's a lot of hard work that you have to do to be able to be accepted to them courts. And a lot of people don't qualify. Or if they do qualify, they go in it and then they end up dropping out because the qualifications and the criteria for it is very, very hard.
Right. And so for all folks out there that are listening and watching, if you're interested in becoming a court watcher or providing court support or need court support, please, reach out to us. All of our information is tied to this show. Our email and website is going across the bottom. You can reach out to Taria, who's one of our Court Watch coordinator. And so we do this, they give out a weekly schedule of the courts that are or the hearings and trials that are going on that week. And we kind of go through or if we have a family member from our hub that has a hearing or a trial that week, we will provide court support for that. So please like and share and all that stuff with this show, because it's not about us. It's about our community. It's about supporting our loved ones who are wrapped up or have, got involved with the criminal legal system for whatever reason. And, sometimes it's just, we're all human beings and we're emotional and, we keep reminding the system that this is human beings that we're talking about, not a number or a charge or a crime, but these are people who are emotional and have trauma and all of those things that just, sometimes we just make a bad decision or can't even think, what it is that we should be doing. So if this is something that you feel called to do or feel led to be involved in, we're certainly, want to have court watchers in as many courtrooms and as many areas as possible as we can. So, Sally, do you want to share anything else or anything more about your experience with being in court with Judge Rogers? You're on mute. There you go.
Okay, thanks. Judge Rogers, I thought, he was the first judge that I experienced, but he seemed to be pretty consistent to me with his demeanor, his voice, and he was always polite. And what I liked was he seemed genuine when he asked the defendants, was there anything they wanted to say? And sometimes commented on that. So I had a good feeling, with him as a judge. But again, I'm pretty inexperienced at this point.
So did any of the defendants have any comments for the judge?
Yeah, they did.
Okay.
They did. Ones that I remembered was there was someone that there was, physical violence involved. I guess it was an assault, and he said the defendant said that he would never be there again, and this wasn't going to happen again. And the judge said, "I hope not, because if I see someone again with a violent charge, it's definitely jail time."
Mm-hmm.
So I gathered that was something that Judge Rogers doesn't tolerate.
Right.
Well.
Right. And there's resources if it's an anger issue, if it's a trauma issue, that the courts will help you, and there's resources out here that we can help folks to get the resources that they need to cope with the trauma and anger and things like that.
Yeah, I did hear that too, Heather. I heard, sometimes it was not a choice, that there was anger management part of the sentence, and then sometimes it was recommended.
Right. And so it could be, a million reasons why it's recommended versus being ordered. But, I think we all can benefit from a little therapy, especially with the things that are going on in the world. Taria, do you have anything to share as far as onboarding court watchers, or, what makes a good court watcher, and what to do when there's a hearing that, not only are we struggling to stay awake in, but the jury's struggling to stay awake and the judge is struggling to stay awake. Sally, you have not been so fortunate to experience that yet, but there are definitely times. Before you answer that, because we're laughing, but I want to say back to Sally, what she said about defendants speaking up. We want to encourage and empower defendants to speak up, because if something's not right, if they don't understand, and Taria, she's nodding her head because she can attest to this, she's seen it firsthand, that is your opportunity to speak up. You don't want everything to be finalized and then you come back and say, "Oh, I should have said, or I meant to say that, or I should have," because it's harder to kind of go back. So when that judge asks you, he's serious. He wants to know, is there anything that he needs to know? And that's your opportunity to say, "You know what? I just met my attorney. We didn't have time to talk," because they asked, "Do you have time? Are you satisfied with your defense?" "No, I just met him. We just talked 15 minutes ago. I didn't have any of that." That's your opportunity to say those things. So, you know what I mean? So I'm glad that there were some folks that, felt compelled to speak. And we want to say, I know it's scary and it's intimidating to speak in front of the whole courtroom and to the judge. You're worried about saying the wrong things or using the wrong words, but that is your opportunity. If something is not right, something doesn't feel right, something got missed, or you something, please speak up. But Taria, talk to us about them cases that folks are struggling with.
So as I counted, so far in 2022, to the end, we serviced and we supported over 100 families with court watching in different cases. We did 50 of the 100 was homicide cases, and they were the cases that were long drawn out. They were the cases that certain when the forensic people get on and the detective gets on, and the the Google analysis man gets on about the cell phone towers. That's the time when you kind of get bored and you kind of fall asleep and your leg gets numbed and you're still trying to pay attention. But the spark of the trials is usually the witnesses, the character witnesses that come in and speak, and especially the ones that are, as we say, the fake thugs, the ones that, the no snitch law that, gave a statement, wrote a statement. Then when it comes to them coming into the courtroom, they want to change their statements because the whole world is looking now and they're going to be labeled as a snitch or a rat. So they're the ones that are entertaining the courtroom. And I think that's the most joy out of them kind of cases because they're saddened. But the most gruesome time in that and saddened time in that them trials is when the autopsies be delivered. And, we went from last year to the beginning of the year, a baby's hearing that was very sad. And that was one that was very, very hard for me to really sit in. When you have a powerful outcome, you have a powerful support group over on the other side, and you're on the defendant side. It was just hard. It was crushing, and it's something that I couldn't stay in past a day or two because it brought my trauma to me, and that was something I had to remove myself from. But court watching is to be a good court watcher, you just have to observe, you have to pay attention, you have to be attentive, and you just have to be alert because you don't want to miss anything. And we tend to take notes so that if it is something that we missed, maybe we can go back to the notes. And sometimes the notes help us, but it also helps defendants sometimes that we're supporting and their lawyers, because it's something a lawyer might have not picked up on, or the defendant might have not picked up that we as court watchers picked up on. And that sometimes helps out with people when they come back on appeals because it's good avenues. So we try to do bulletin points. And then we also just try to give the family support, and we just try to just let them know that, to respect the courtroom, your defendant and your loved one is fighting for their life, and it's not about you, it's about them. And the juries look at that. The juries look at how many people support. The juries look at how the people come in there acting, how they dressing, how they're speaking, and that all takes a toll on, I believe, an outcome of a verdict.
Right. You touched on so many things, and I was just so enthralled listening. I ain't taking any notes to go back and be like, oh, this and that. But so there's a question about watching a case, and can anybody come in? Like I told Sally, we're training her, for what to look for. In particular, for a trial, we have a form that we kind of want to know who the judge is, what the defendant, the charges, the demographics of the jury, the DA, who's who and what's what, all those players. But you touched on a couple of things that I just want to highlight that these are the reasons why we do what we do. You said something about being able to take notes and sharing this with the defense attorney, because they rehearse their trial tactics, right? They have what they're going to say, what they're going to do, because they've practiced it and they kind of know what's going on. But sometimes people get up and they say different things, or there's a jury member that's sleeping, or a jury member is just like scratching their head, looking around all confused, right? So the defense attorneys don't necessarily pick that up because they're focused, they're reading their notes. They have to say what they intended to say. So, we do have relationships, especially if it's a loved one or somebody in our hub, that we are confident to be able to go to that defense attorney and say, hey, and give them our notes. So that's one of the things. And also too, and this is for Sally and anybody else that's interested in court watching, and Taria touched on it, and this stuff is really, really heavy at times, that you have to be mindful of your own trauma and your own triggers. And we will not ask anyone to sit in on a case that they are not comfortable, or if it's a trigger for them. We do have resources that we give our own people, our court watchers, and all our volunteers that are in our hub for self-care. But you have to recognize, and it is hard, you know what I mean? Because you are seeing some graphic images and things like that. And, it's emotional and it's heavy. And like Taria said, there are no winners in this. The family, of the victims, they've lost their loved one. The person that's on trial for whatever crime, like they potentially could, they could be lost to, incarceration. And so it's just not a good space. And it's really, really hard. And our job is to try to, again, bring the humanness and remind everybody that we're talking about human beings. Everybody involved in this process is a human being. And so, Taria, I thank you for reminding us of that there are some cases that it's hard and you have to step back. And sometimes, Taria has been verbally attacked by family, members because we're sitting on the defense side. But, there's times that there's defendants in there that have no one. They're literally in there by themselves. And it's like, they're going through this entire process by themselves, and such a lonely feeling. And, we have folks that are going to be coming home. And so when the DA is so vicious and so violent and in the way they attack and describe the defendants that, how are they coming back from that after you've just ripped their character to shreds? And then they're going to a facility that has nothing to help them build themselves back up and be prepared to come back into our community. And it's like, how are they allowed to do this? And so we really try to, remind folks that, we see you, we know you're a human being, and we're going to respect you as such. And so to that question, can anyone sit and watch a court? Absolutely. You don't need our permission. You don't have to be a part of our group. Is it beneficial to be a part of our group? Absolutely, because then we can kind of tally our information and our observations and use it for something useful versus you just kind of holding it to yourself. And so absolutely anybody can sit in. It's open to the public, and that's your right. This is our right. These proceedings are public for a reason. And so, except the juveniles. And so absolutely you can be there just to observe and see how it's done so that you can yourself kind of make an assessment on the case and or the court process and see how it's going. So we are going to take a quick break, but I'm not going to stop talking because I have to do this commercial because we are having our second annual Love Bonds fundraiser. Our initial part of our origin story was that we wanted to bail out our first families for Valentine's Day. And so we are quickly coming up on Valentine's Day, 3 weeks from today. Our goal is to raise $20,000 so that we can bail out as many people prior or to around Valentine's Day as possible. Our tickets are $65. All that information will be on our social media and everywhere. Comedy show. I mean, this platform has allowed so many other people to grow. And as we do this, you'll hear me talk about our community and how we have to create community for our people, because having a criminal background makes it extremely difficult to get employment and housing and all these things, like we've said, about once you come home, how are you going to live? You know what I mean? Because you're not incarcerated. A mistake is not, can be life-changing, not life-ending. And so we're trying to create platforms that, incarceration wasn't an end-of-life experience for some people, that they can come home and can get their lives back and try to do something. And so we have entrepreneurs in our spaces that can give people jobs. We have real estate investors that have housing that can give people housing that are coming home from incarceration. So those funds and those resources help us build community around those folks that are coming home from incarceration so that they can integrate back into the community and live the lives that, they were born to live and be productive. And so the first 50 people that register and buy a ticket will get a free book of the Oscar-nominated documentary Time. Our friends in New Orleans, Fox and Rob, they have an incredible love story. They are going to be our February guests and talking about their love story and how it was impacted by incarceration and time. 21 years she fought for her husband's freedom. So the first 50 guests are going to get that book at the event, and you will I'm trying to read comments. So they'll get that book at the event, and I think there's an audio book, and we just got some super dope stuff that's going to be going on. A full-blown comedy show. We've got awesome catered cuisine by Flavors Catering. The comics that are going to be I don't know if it's going to be autographed, but we'll see. They are going to come to town, so bring your book if you get one. The comedians that are, going to be joining us that night, putting on a show for us. Eric Preston, who's going to be hosting. He co-hosted with me last year, and all year, this kid has been burning up the stages everywhere, doing his comedy. His goal, his life dream was to do stand-up comedy. And from that day until this next day, February 14th, in 3 weeks, he will have a year under his belt doing comedy. And those two people that are joining him, Chica Loca, she's open for Gary Owen, and the other gentleman, he's open for other folks and going to be performing on Chocolate Sunday. So he is bringing A-list comedians to this event. And so, if you can, come out, join, support. If you want to just buy a ticket and send, a formerly incarcerated person to have a good time with us, please do so. It's for a good cause. We're reuniting families for Valentine's Day. And so before we close, I want to talk about the difference between bail bonds and bail funds. And so there's a huge difference, which also ties into why we do what we do. If you use a bail bond company, they charge a fee. Okay, so they charge a fee for you to borrow their money for them to post for your loved one so that your loved one can come home from pretrial incarceration. So they come home, fight their case from home. If that case is dismissed, that person's found not guilty or whatever, you don't get that money back. They keep that money. And so you've spent time in jail, you spent money to fight your case, and at the end of the day, you're no better off, and then you have to fight for an expungement or get that record clean when you're using a bail bondsman. And they're not here for the movement. They're not here to help people get better and do better and get the best outcome for their case. They're literally here to make money. It is a money-making industry. It's for profit, and they will come get you if you don't go to court. So they will come get you and make sure that you go back to jail because they don't want to lose their money that they posted for you. So not only do they get that fee, but they get the extra stuff too. And so the difference between supporting a bail fund like us, and there's hundreds of bail funds across the country, we don't charge a fee. We lose the fee that the county keeps, from us for their administrative process. But, that money will come back to us once that individual has satisfied their obligations to the court, and we can then recycle that money and free more people. So bail funds, I know bail bonds, sometimes the bail is so high that a bail fund can't do it, and you may have to use a bail bonds, and we understand it. But that's not something that we encourage, and we really try to use participatory defense to help them manage the case and maybe get bails reduced and things like that. And so there's just lots of opportunity instead of feeding that system that is designed to keep people oppressed, to keep poor people poor. We've got people in MCCF on $100 bails. We just did our statistics. We had 4 people out of the 26 people that we posted bail for that were sitting for $77. And so, and 50% of those bails were $500 or less. So it's not a lot of money for most people in their heads, or that they can call someone to raise the money or the $100 or the $500. But the fact that people can't tells a whole nother story. And we could talk about that later. What if teens want to help with incarcerated people and want to support? So teenagers can certainly provide court watching support. If you're not in school, or if there's a time off, or say there's a project you want to do, a report, or there's something going on in the school, in your school that you want to do something for. I think scheduler wise, it might be a little difficult because most teenagers are in school during the day, but summertime is certainly, or in times of spring break and winter break and things like that, they can certainly get involved. And it's a good teaching tool, and hopefully it will open the eyes of, young people that, this is what happens. It's not something that you watch Law and Order and you just see, clips of, this and that, and you don't really see what actually happens to people after they've been convicted, or the stress that people go through with actually going through a trial and having someone's life in the balance of 12 people or a judge, and see how it ends, it comes to fruition, or they call it the resolution or disposition of the case. We are almost near the end, and I always tell our producer that it's going to be 45 minutes, but I talk a lot. So y'all can just tell me to shut up and stop talking, because we just talk because I get so excited. And excuse my F-bomb, Sally, but I warned you earlier that we have this what the fuck moment. And I kind of say, you want to share a WTF moment for us that you may have experienced either in your court watching experience or any other experience that just kind of makes you scratch your head in frustration, or it could be a good thing. It could be like, wow, yay, we actually got this done. You want to share your WTF moment with us, Sally? You're on mute, Zach. You got to unmute her.
Okay. Let's see. I'm trying to think. I guess it was the poor guy that was only allowed to have 2 boxes to review at a time.
Right.
Because it was a fire hazard.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, you just be like, well, can I sit in a room, or can I, go somewhere where you have them and, work that process out? And and not just that, but we've had folks that they'll only send it electronically. And so they only have a certain amount of time to be able to review their discovery, and they have to, make an appointment with their caseworker and stuff like that. And, it's just a huge thing. So, yeah, I appreciate that being a WTF moment, because you should have easy access to your defense materials. Taria, do you have a WTF moment you want to share, love?
It's many of them, but
Many.
my what the F moment is when a judge decided to tell, I guess he went from a judge to a psychiatrist, and he told a defendant that he don't believe that he has a mental illness. So that was my what the F moment to me, because at the end of the day, you got to kind of stay in your lane, and whatever you are, you have to stay in your lane, and pretty much, what you went to school for is what you should have just been up there to do. And you're a judge, so you really shouldn't have told client, defendant, that you don't believe he has mental illnesses. So
Right.
That's what that was.
Okay, so I'm gonna forego my my WTF moment was the shootings and all of that stuff. So I'll divert, because we had 2 questions and a comment. Kia reminded us that most people don't understand that we're not there to defend an individual's actions, but to support and try and get fair treatment for the defendant. And that's exactly right. And we can't say it enough. We say it over and over and over again. We're not anti-police. We're not anti-court process. We're not, against the DAs. We just want fair treatment. We want the people to do their jobs in their certain roles. We want the detectives to do detective work, not rely on, witness testimony that puts them in danger to try and do that. You have to get that information. So there's just a lot of things, or the DAs that, are omitting things, or they, forget or give you 30 boxes and, you can't get through 30 boxes, or, they just make it, such a difficult process when, because they want a conviction versus, getting justice. And so we definitely need to keep reminding people. And Taria, I'll let you answer this question. How are you received by the judges and the court personnel? I think you have logged the most hours with court watching that you can kind of give us an overview, at least for the Court of Common Pleas. You know what I mean? We kind of, guest appearances in other courtrooms, but the Court of Common Pleas, Taria, I think you've logged the most hours. Give us some.
Yes, and I we have grown. Our relationship has grown with the court personnel and the judges. A lot of judges now see that we're present, and I see that their demeanor has changed. A lot of personnel have been very curious of who we are. So now it's like they're being friendly to ask questions, and DAs are definitely being alerted to who we are, and they want to know what's going on. So, but what they do is that instead of being direct, they be indirect, and then you always got one out of the crowd that will be direct enough to say, you know, what do y'all do, and who are y'all here for, and who do you have today? And the biggest supporters of our group is it is the sheriff's department, and they love what we do, and they're actually the biggest critics when it comes to court watching, because they have their own opinions also.
Right.
And yeah, so it comes a time where we even have a countdown when we think the verdict's going to come back with the juries, and that's the same thing that the DA's office does too. So that's how we know that we've been in the courtroom too many times.
Right.
But I did have one thing I wanted to say real fast, Heather, is that one thing also that, and this is to elaborate off of what Kia said, what we got to let people understand also is that, we do not defend people's actions if they're wrong. We're there to support them because we don't know if they're guilty or not, because we're not the judges. That's for the judges to determine, and the jurors. Mm-hmm. But what we also got to let people know is that, we sometimes are down there with our own loved ones that's fighting for cases. Right. So it's impacting us as a whole also. So we have been on that side also that somebody else been. And I just always say that you just never judge a book by its cover. You never know what shoes that you might have to fill, because you don't know if your loved one would get into trouble or not. So you could be on the victim side at one time, but one time you could be on the defendant side too. And we learned that. Yeah. And I also just wanted to say one more thing is that some of these defendants don't even know, and what we're good at for them as advocates and as court watchers is that some of them don't even know what they're coming upon. I had a phone call tonight from a defendant that is going to trial March 2nd, and he wanted to know the process, because his lawyer is not really giving them the lowdowns of what's next, and how, what time does his family have to be there, and what is jury picking, how long does it take? So that's where we come into play at also.
Right. And even for them getting their clothes, you know what I mean? Am I allowed to wear clothes? Like, so you've experienced that, sometimes they didn't want them to have, put their suit on. They wanted them to come down in their oranges and reds, and yes, that says something to the juror. That's bias, and that's, what I mean? So some of those tactics that the DA uses that we catch, that most people don't think of, like, oh, well, they don't think that they're allowed to come down in their regular clothes, for a hearing or a trial. And absolutely, they can come down in their regular clothes, and we just make sure that they're available for them. We can, and thank goodness this is a Court Watch edition, because we can talk about this, over and over and over again, all the stories that we have. So episode 4, we will have Court Watch again in February. If you haven't watched Purely Speculation, please go to our YouTube channel and our Facebook page, the Reuniting Family Bail Fund. We had Dalen Leach last month, this month, who was phenomenal with our kicking off our Cannabis Chronicles and things about cannabis and how our folks are impacted with the criminal justice system and legalization of cannabis. So please continue to like and share, because this is valuable information that we need to get out to our people. And my sister Ethel, you're very, very welcome. Thank you for the support. And Sally and Taria, I thank you all so much for being in the courtroom, being allies, being troopers. And, we're in the trenches, and it's, we have those ups and downs, and I'm just happy that you guys are my sisters. Sally, you're my sister now. So we're family, and that's just what we do. And so until next time, till we're in the courtroom together, peace and love. I love you guys. Thank you.
Love you too. Good job, Miss Sally.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Purely Speculation. If you learned something, share something. Please like, follow, and share this show. The more our communities know, the more they are empowered, and the faster we can create change. Purely Speculation would not be made possible without the generous support of the Community Justice Exchange, the Health Sparks Frank E. Boston Black Justice Fund, Philadelphia Foundation, and Reform Alliance. Thank you. Booyah!
Intuition different, already lived and dreamt it. Visions make my vision clear as I'm jogging through this fog of life. I be fog eyes with the fox head, body and I'm all set. Baby, can you be my Cardi B?